All right, welcome back. Today we have Coach Schnabel. I got it right. I'm so pumped that I said it right. He's the offensive line coach at Arkansas Tech. Coach, thanks for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
I'm so pumped up when I get people's last names right. I'm like, that's a win in my English column.
Right. I get fired up, if in recruiting and visits and stuff like that. If there's ever a real challenging last name, like I take it as a personal challenge to make sure like I always spell it correctly or
Yep.
try to figure out how to pronounce it correctly too.
Yeah. I work in a school that's sort of high Hispanic. So when I first got there like 3.5 years ago, I screwed up everybody's name all the time. And then now when I see it, I'm like, I kind of get it now. I kind of say with a little Spanish impression of it now. And they make fun of me. They're like, "You country boy coming in here talking to us," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm,
Yeah.
I'm sorry," but I get pumped up when it's right. So, Coach, let's talk about you. Let's talk about how you got into coaching, why you coach, how'd you end up at Arkansas Tech? Take us down through that path that led us there.
Yeah, I think for me, just a big part of getting into coaching was, the experiences that I was fortunate to be a part of, not only in high school, probably more so in my college experience. So I'm originally, from a small town in South Dakota. I graduated with about 46 other students. So, very small
Yep.
school and rural school, and I grew up on a farm. So, you know, uh, it was one of those situations where everybody does everything in
Yep.
school. Everybody's in all the sports and all the fine arts and all that stuff, and you just don't know any different. So,
Hmm.
but enjoyed playing sports and football specifically. I was fortunate to be able to continue playing at the college level and had an opportunity to play at the University of Sioux Falls.
Hmm.
And so spent 5 years there from 2005 to 2010 is when I graduated, and was super fortunate, looking back on it, to be a part of a great run, with some national championships at the NAIA level, and tremendous coaches who were there at the time. Coach Kalen DeBoer was our head coach, and Coach Ryan Grubb was my offensive line coach for a few of those years. So those guys have now had quite the path over the last 10 to 15 years,
Yep.
and are doing awesome things. So had wonderful coaching, great support from the university. Football was important there at Sioux Falls and still is. And it is important to be successful, and had a lot of great support and good players, and fortunate to be a part of those teams. So, I always, keep it real. And I mean, for me, my role, especially, my last few years there, was more as kind of a backup on the offensive line,
Hmm.
as kind of the sixth man, and backed up a couple different positions. We had several All-Americans, but I took a lot of pride in just knowing, understanding my role, and and knowing, everything in case my number was called upon, that I could, step in and be someone who, wasn't going to let anybody down, and knew what we were doing schematically, knew what calls to make and all that, and super fortunate to be a part of a great team and great experience. So, I have always been, always enjoyed sports, and always also, like, I'm a little bit of a science nerd, nothing super over the top, but
Hmm.
was always interested in, science classes were in high school were always what piqued my interest. So, knew I wanted to go to college, do something science related. Um, didn't want to go down necessarily the engineering route, too much math for me, and didn't want to go down necessarily the medical route. So, after about a year or so, decided that, the way to kind of, keep merge, my two main interests in football, sports, and science was to get into education. So,
Hmm.
I ended up earning a biology degree with secondary education from Sioux Falls, and out of college, first job was in Pierre, South Dakota, TF Riggs High School. I spent 3 years there, teaching and coaching at the high school level, and learned a lot, and enjoyed that. My main responsibility was with the freshman team, and then I assisted with varsity. So it was great to, see things from a different perspective, and really have to, learn how to coach players who, I mean, literally had no clue what they were doing, some of them
Yep.
on the football field. So, was some interesting, experiences looking back at that, but that was great. And as I graduated, college and was looking at getting out into the real world and getting a job, it had a desire to try and be a grad assistant somewhere. It didn't work out right away, but after a couple of years, had an opportunity to then head out to Western South Dakota, Black Hills State University. I got a grad assistant spot there, and then was fortunate to be able to kind of be promoted there over time into more of a part-time coaching role and then a full-time role, and spent 7 years there, and ended up always working with the offensive line. Ended up taking on recruiting coordinator duties and run game coordinator duties there too, and then ended up in 2020 making my way to Missouri Baptist University in the St. Louis area.
Hmm.
Spent 3 seasons there as the O-line coach, recruiting coordinator, and then last 2 seasons there as the offensive coordinator as well. So it was a lot of learning on the fly or on the job
Yeah.
training,
Yeah.
and I don't think, anyone's ever, or you may think you're prepared for that, but you truly aren't until, you're in those shoes in terms of game planning and delegating duties and practice planning, and all those types of things. But that was a great experience. Learned a lot, what not to do, what to do,
Yeah.
and kind of how to put everything together. So very, fortunate to have that experience there, and here and now I'm at Arkansas Tech. Over the summer, they had a change at the offensive line position, and I ended up having a little bit of a previous connection with the offensive coordinator here, Don Maroc, and long story short, ended up getting the opportunity to come here as the offensive line coach late in the summer, in July. So the last half a year has been a little bit of a whirlwind,
Hmm.
but it's all good, and really, now we are kind of not quite to the middle of our spring practices. We just got back from spring break, so today is our first day back. So had a workout, and we'll get back into practicing tomorrow. But just super excited to be part of the development of an entire year with the offensive line group here,
Right.
and we got a lot of great kids, and we've got a good nucleus of guys who are returning, and really get to work with them now for a full year. So yeah, that's a little bit of my journey, and I just enjoy being able to have an impact, on young men, and I think that's the main reason that I coach, being able to influence them in growing up, turning from boys and growing from boys into being men, and not
Hmm.
just on a football field, but trying to instill, habits that these guys are going to take with them the rest of their life, into their jobs, into their communities, into, marriages, into being parents and all those things. So, what that's really my first and foremost
Hmm.
reason why I coach, and there's also the competitive element. Like,
Yeah.
I just love the ability as a coach. You still get to be involved in the competitive situations, and the feeling you get on game days, the feeling you get in the heat of battle, the
Hmm.
adrenaline and all that stuff. So, a combination of those main factors are really, why I coach and why I love what I do.
Yeah. I said when I don't have fun or I'm not competitive, it's time to walk away. That would be the
Yeah,
time, or
absolutely. Especially, with the amount of time that you
yeah.
um, as coaches and players too, at the college level, like, if our guys, if they don't love it, they've lost the desire to play. You see it
Yeah.
first off as a coach, and if that's gone, then there's a lot of work and many hours that go into it. So
Hmm.
as a coach too, the moment that either of those two elements disappear, then it's time to find something else you're passionate about.
Yeah. Because obviously we love, like, because I've been a high school coach for 14 years. Love helping the kids, but part of it has to be for me too. Like I love the X's and O's. I love competing. I love all that other stuff. The moment that I don't like any of that football stuff, I'll find a different way to help kids, but it won't be 12 hours a day or 10 hours a day working in a school, then going to practice, then watching film, and then getting the practice plan ready, thinking of drills, reaching out to coaches to ask questions, and all that stuff would stop. And
Yeah.
my wife might like me more if that happened, but you know, I always said like as soon as that stops is when I know I got to stop or take a break. That's why
Yeah.
like I'm very blessed to have a week off here for spring break. Like just a break. I'm always good after a break. I need like a week or two, then I'm good to go. But like the COVID year when it was boom, boom, like in Illinois, all three sports were between January and May, and I did all three, and it was just boom, 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 boom. That was the one time where I sat back and go, do I want to keep coaching? Because it was just back to back to back to back with no time. But then we had the summer and everything. But yeah. And I love how you said you graduated 46 people. I graduated 76, and I always thought that was small. So when I hear something smaller, I go, oh, that's a real small town. That's a really small town. And you're right.
Oh
All
yeah.
you knew was to play sports. It was either play sports
Yeah.
or work. It was one of the two.
Yeah, or you play sports so you don't have to work.
Yes.
That's your way to escape and
Yeah.
get away. So
That's
yeah,
what
and
my
that's pretty
parents.
typical in South Dakota. That's probably pretty typical school size. There's
Okay.
obviously a handful of larger schools in the state. Just weird population distribution in that part of the country.
Hmm.
But you hear every once in a while there's graduating classes around that's the state of 4, 5, 6 students. So
Oh,
yeah, it's
wow.
kind of crazy.
Yeah, because my school was 300 kids. We were like one of the biggest graduating classes at 76. And then my wife is from the suburbs of Chicago. She graduated with like, oh goodness, 600, 700. And she goes, I didn't know half of them or over half. And I said, hey, I knew everybody. I knew their family. I knew their life. And they're like, yeah, I didn't know them. I only knew the people I hung around with. Or, you might have seen, and they were like, there's people I never seen before. And I'm like, oh, this is just two different worlds here. You got Chicagoland and you got Central Illinois. There's two completely different things. And I always find that funny. And like you said, my parents said, you're playing sports or working. And I was like, well, I don't want to work. I'll go play sports. And that's all you knew. Uh,
Yep.
Besides a summer job, you might mow the grass or bale hay or do whatever. And that was it. Like the summer, you could do stuff. The school year, they're like, nah, you can play sports. But the moment you stop, you got to get a job. So I never quit. That was one of my motivating factors of I am not getting a job. I'm going to play sports,
Yeah, exactly.
especially in 2008, maybe when gas went up to like $5. I was definitely like, I don't want to go work for sure. But my parents were like, we're not spending gas money either. It's $5. So I had to ride my bike back to school. And we were like 2 miles away. Like, ride your bike. And
Yeah, get a
nowadays,
little extra workout in, right?
yeah, kids don't know that anymore. They're like, I'm not riding my bike to school. I'm going to Uber. They're like, we have kids that Uber to school. And I'm like, are you kidding me? That wasn't a thing.
Yeah, different times.
Oh, for sure. Um, so you say you were at the high school level first, then went to GA, and you dealt with high school kids that you like, oh, we all have funny stories. Like this kid doesn't know how to tie his shoes. This kid doesn't know how to put shoulder pads on, and you find it hilarious. Like you don't know. Or like I remember one time, my first time coaching, we had a kid come to practice in cargo shorts. He's in cargo shorts and cleats, and you just have to deal with it. You're like, well, get some athletic shorts. You can't afford them. We're gonna find some old ones. Did that help you at all going to be a GA? Because I know I've heard a lot of GA stories. Did that like help prepare you for the GA spot, or were you like, oh, there's even more I don't even know how to do?
I think probably the biggest thing is just, starting at that level, the high school level or, freshman, middle school is like how basic you have to be in
Uh-huh.
terms of explaining and teaching,
Yeah.
teaching things as a coach. And, I don't think that, that certainly is helpful, at the college level too,
Right.
and yeah, we get to recruit the players that, are going to be on your team, but, that still doesn't mean that, what they've been asked to do schematically, you might have a super wide range, of what somebody's ran in high school and how well they've been coached and how well they've been developed, and there's certain players who are just have great raw athletic ability, but to no fault of their own, they come from smaller programs or programs with different levels of coaching and just really haven't been coached, at a very high level.
Right.
Um, and you've also got kids who come from good programs, good coaching, who do have a great base to build on. So, I think for me, probably the one of the best things that I learned at the high school level is just, to understand and start really from ground zero
Hmm.
when you're teaching things, whether it's scheme wise, whether it's technique wise. You got to be a good communicator. You've got to be able to reach guys with different learning styles. And a lot of things. And you mentioned technology and watching a ton of stuff online
Yep.
over COVID. And I think one of the great things that came from that is just people had to shift. There's a lot of shifting from your in-person clinics and all that
Hmm.
stuff to so much more online. And like there's so much information out there
Yeah.
available right now. So it's looking at that and figuring out, using some discernment and judgment and figuring out what's going to best fit you, and um, that definitely is something is a balancing act, trying to see what schemes and things out there might work for you or what might not. But yeah, so just being able to teach and you know have to hit the different learning styles is
Hmm.
big. No task too big or small. I mean,
Yep.
high school level, in terms of doing things field work, in terms of doing things with equipment, in terms of doing things with fundraising. Those are a lot of things that the level of football that I've coached at, still the D2 level, the NAI level. I mean,
Hmm.
there's a lot of places where you gotta wear many hats.
Right.
You're an academic coordinator, you might
Yeah.
be line in the fields yet. I've done that. You may be, organizing fundraisers, you're doing everything, and usually that gets delegated and split up throughout the staff. But especially yet the Division II level, the NAI level, there's a lot of similarities in the extra duties and things that you've got to do as a coach yet. They're similar to the high school level. So yeah, just no job too big or too small, learning that at the high school level, and then just kind of being able to teach and at the most basic level and build from there. Probably two of the biggest things that I learned.
Yeah. I used to coach kids like the same, like overall, like I'm gonna coach them the same way. And then the older I got, the more I realized this kid doesn't understand what I'm saying. This kid does. Maybe this kid can't quite do the load step I want him to do. So how do I get him there? Oh, wait, that's extra coaching. I'm not going to do it. They have to figure it out. Then the more older I got, then I said, well, no, this kid can't do this step. How do I get him to where I need him to go? We're going to figure it out. Well, coach, why are you teaching it like I've had a kid? Why does he not have to do it? I'm like, because he can't do it. You can be quiet and go do it, type of thing. And that's why O line is one of the toughest because instead of three kids or two kids, you got five. Then you got the backups. How do you get, like, if a kid goes down and they go in, well, I don't know what a load step is. All right, run at him then. Like, just get there. And that's one big thing, like you said, figure out how to teach them. Is there key words? Because their attention spans are real small nowadays. It's TikTok, it's 6 to 10 seconds. How do you get them a key word where it's their attention span's not, they're not looking at the butterfly flying over, like, I'm done listening to you. And like I became a OC at the age of 24 for varsity, and you thought you knew everything, and that's where that mindset came in is no, just do it. Just do it. Like we all were coached when we played in high school, like just do it. This is the way. And then the older I got, I realized you can't do that with every kid. Some kids you can yell at, some kids you got to bring them in and whisper sweet nothings into their ear to get them going. And that's been a big thing for me. Like yours is different going to college, but for me, that's been a huge change in the last few years, especially after COVID. That was where it really clicked and realized with technology and everything how you had to change as a coach.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny. The story I think of or remember from coaching the freshman level high school is we were playing a team, who was going to run dive option, like old school
Yeah.
I formation, triple option, fullback
Yep.
dive, quarterback keeps, quarterback pitches, right? So
Yep.
we knew, we were working on that throughout the course of the week. Like, hey, when they run the option, D end, you've got the quarterback, and had assignments for everybody on it, and end up getting into the game. And this is after 2 or 3 days of practice with our freshmen. And sure enough, the opposing team runs dive option.
Hmm.
Quarterback pulls it. out of the fullback's, belly and keeps it around the edge for a big gain and defensive end, flew down the line of scrimmage,
Hmm.
tackles the fullback, and when he's supposed to have quarterback, and so call him out and ask him on the sideline, like, hey, hey Johnny, like who do you have on the option? And on the sideline during the game, he said, Coach, what's an option? And after we practiced it all week,
Yep.
so oh boy, and growing up and NCAA football, was
Oh,
on video game was still a thing then, you know what I mean? So it's
right.
like, how do you, as a high school, even a freshman in high school, you're playing football, but you don't know what the option is. Like that was
Oh
one of
yeah.
those moments for me, like, oh my goodness, you've got to be so basic and in explaining what everything is to these guys. So, we just took for granted that through the week of practice, saying this is the option and what's going on, that everybody understood it, but they didn't.
Oh yeah. Like I remember saying RPOs and saying, well, RPO came from triple option, and it was the same story. They go, what's triple option? And you have to go like this, and you're like, wait, you don't know what that means? And I said, you know how when you pull the ball and throw it, instead of that, they used to just fling it out there for the running back, and they were like, what? Isn't that a pass? And you have to go like this, and you're like, oh God, okay, here we go. And they don't, because we don't run triple options. They're like, what? And then like, yeah, we used to not block the one technique, and then that's the best part. It's like, what's a one technique? And then I have to take a bigger deep breath, and I go, well, I can't blame you because in high school we didn't call it that. We just said inside man. But even that, you're like, wait, what? And then you really blow their minds when you do old school techniques. I don't. I do like 6I7. Yeah, yeah, that's the way I go. But if you go the actual route, they go, why did you just skip these numbers? And you're like, shut up. This
Yeah.
is just how football is, man.
Yeah. No matter what level you're at, is just a common language is so important,
Yeah.
and I learned right through teaching high school and coming up, getting more experience at the college level that you have to have a common language with how you're identifying defenses, with what you name techniques, with you name
Hmm.
it, and it's so important, and I try not to, I think a lot about that, or try to be cognizant of that. It's never like this guy or that person, go, you gotta block this guy, you gotta be that
Hmm.
person, it's the Sam, it's the Will, it's the 2I, it's the 30 backer, so, but yeah, just the common language is so important.
Well, that's why around this time I'll start having like football 101 with the old linemen. So they'll come in
Yeah,
like once a week. And like the first meeting, again, you can't have like a 10 thing PowerPoint because their attention span is so low. So I have it down to like a page and a half where I'm like, here's our old line, like this is who we are, this is how we do things. Next meeting would be, okay, let's start from the ground up. Here's an A gap, here's a B gap. And the seniors will sit there and go, oh, but you got younger guys, new guys. I'm like, hey, we got to do this. And I look at the senior, I'm like, how many blocks did you screw up because you didn't know that was the A gap or one technique? So be quiet. And that's how I do it. I go, this is A gap, this is a one technique, two technique. And then I have them go to the board and draw it up. And then we just gradually go from there. And then, like, because in Illinois, we don't have spring ball. So we can't really go out there and do things. They've been more lenient on the rules now, but you can't be in pads and helmets. And so that's my first thing is boom, boom, boom. We're going to start from the ground up. So when we come into the summer and we're actually on the field, hey, get to the one technique. And now they'll remember, oh, yeah, he talked about the one technique. Now we can actually see it. Um,
yeah,
just another hat I have to wear as a high school coach, like you have to do in the morning before school. So come in at 7 a.m., come in at this time. Uh, on top of I'm the sprint coach now. So it's like, hey, we got to do sprints now to get you in shape. So it's just adding on. And I look at the head coach. Do I get overtime stipend for this, for doing this extra stuff? No, no, you don't.
yeah, right.
Or I say it to AD all the time. I'm like, is there a stipend for this? And he just laughs. He goes, wait till your football stipend in August. Just wait for that.
Yeah.
Um, when you got to college, another one that people tell me is one of the biggest differences was recruiting. Was that a big difference for you when you got to college? Was the actual recruiting part, or was that just an easy thing to adjust to?
Yeah, you know what? It was obviously understood that that was going to be a part of the deal, right?
Right.
And that's another thing, at the small college level, your grad assistants, I mean, your part-time or stipend coaches, whatever it is, I mean, they're fully involved,
Hmm.
number one with their positions, and then
Yeah.
number two in recruiting, so I know that's something that's not the same at higher levels. There's restrictions on things to do. And I think, you know, in the coaching profession, you hear a lot about guys who have aspirations of coaching at the Division I level,
Hmm.
or maybe in off the field positions and things like that, and or just want a GA at the Division I level. And I would, if you truly want to coach, like, and you truly want to get involved with all this stuff, like doing it at the Division II level, NAIA level, I mean, you're truly going to be a position coach, and you're going to recruit, like, and you're going to have other duties that you're learning how to do.
Right.
So just from an experience standpoint, there's so much that you learn from experiencing experiencing it, and doing it on the job. So for me, it was a lot of learning on the job. The other coaches, helped me and gave advice and hints. And we had at that point when I started coaching at the college level at Black Hills State, we divided everything by territories. That's how we did
Hmm.
it there. And I had a large portion of the state of South Dakota. Black Hills was on the very western edge of the state, and a couple of the other coaches had that small region.
Hmm.
But then I recruited the rest of the state, and then I also had part of Arizona as my other recruiting area, which may seem really weird, but that was for us a place that there's an airline, Allegiant Airlines flew directly out of Rapid City. They had
Hmm.
direct flights down to Mesa, Arizona that were cheap, and they were direct. So, and 15 years ago now, I think Phoenix and Arizona in general, there's no Division II football teams there. They had, a different junior college conference at the time, but you really only had Arizona, Arizona State, Northern Arizona were really the only 4-year schools there. And then it was all junior college, opportunities. So there was kind of this big gap of, players that, and good talent for the Division II level. So the first several years, we didn't have it in the budget for me to go down there physically.
Hmm.
So was phone recruiting and emails, and sitting and just going through teams huddle pages, and we didn't have a recruiting staff, but that's another one of the things the smaller
Yeah.
schools, like your each position coach, like you're your own
Right.
recruiting staff. So,
Right.
depending on what your territory is, depending on what different recruiting services you're able to pay for budget wise, like to do that stuff for you. That can be very labor intensive, and it really was. And I'm glad I went through that. Um, but just would literally go through huddles, email coaches, get lists back from them. Keep an eye. At that time, still Twitter, right? So
Hmm.
start following some some of the newspaper writers down there, and some accounts that would put out news about Arizona high school football landscape. So, that was really my, first experience recruiting. Was a lot of phone calls, emails, trying to convince someone from Phoenix, Arizona to come up to Spearfish, South Dakota, which is quite a different climate,
Right.
really depending on what time of year it is. So, but we had some success, got some good difference makers out of there, and eventually, about by year 4 or 5, we had enough success that it was worthwhile to send me down there, and spend a week here or there doing some recruiting and getting around and seeing people face to face. So, I was usually doing that the last week of November or the first week of December. So it was a great trip for me. It
Yeah.
was about 70 or 80 degrees in the
Right.
valley. And, it might have been, I think I missed a snowstorm or two back in South Dakota. So
No
that was
complaints. No
no
complaints about
complaints. That's right. That was a great, I don't know how I, ended up being so lucky to get that, but a lot of trial and error. I mean, it's a lot of work. It's finding guys and reaching out to them to see who has, and trying to discern who has legitimate interest, and who would be cool getting that far away from home and coming into, a new part of the country. so the football part of it, recognizing whether or not they can help you as a football player, that's the easy part.
Hmm.
Especially at the Division II level, the small college level, because then you're looking at most, depending on how each school does it, but you're looking at partial scholarships, you're looking
Right.
at all sorts of different factors, travel, like all that stuff. So there's so many different things that go into it. But it was a great experience just learning on my own and getting help from some of our other coaches and recruiting, was definitely, obviously it's the lifeblood of your program, right? Getting players in who can help you and can be good ambassadors for your team and for your school and can help you win games. I always tell our guys, it's not, I'm not out there on Saturdays, right? So it doesn't matter what I know and what I can
Right.
do. It matters what you know and what you can do.
I was going to ask you this because this weekend I grew up by Champaign-Urbana, and they had their clinic. Their Saturday practice was open. It was first full
Mhm.
padded practice, so I got to go down there. I've been in communication with their O-line coach. He's been on here a couple times, and I was talking to him after practice. We had these what's it called, Rising Stars or something. So some kids are getting recruited, and they come up. They're handing business cards out now, like to him, like here's my business, like this card. And there was this other guy that had played at U of I, and he's talking to him at the same time I was, and he goes, "You gotta be shitting me. There's business cards. Like, is that how recruiting works?" And he looked and he goes, "Yeah, some kids come up and they hand you this to call this number." And I'm like, "You gotta be kidding me." And he goes, "Steve, it's changed. Recruiting has changed so much so rapidly." And I'm like, I don't think I knew what a business card was when I was that old. And he's like,
Yeah,
"Oh, like he goes, I prefer not to do that. I prefer not the business card thing. I prefer the phone call, the visiting, Zoom and stuff like that." He goes, but man, so I don't know if you've seen that. I never seen that before, like business cards being handed out.
I have not. I'm sure I haven't gotten as many business cards handed to me as Coach Miller there at Illinois, but yeah, I've seen a little bit of it. More than anything, I mean, it's just social media that players reach out to us as
Mhm.
coaches. So,
Right.
it's just which is awesome. Number one, guys being proactive, right, and wanting to get their name out there and everything too. But and on the other hand, it just is creates. I know for me, I try to do a good job of responding to messages and emails and all that. I know everybody's different. Certain coaches are going to turn off the DMs and
Hmm.
others, not going to respond to things. And I try, to do my best to do that, but it's takes a lot of time too. It's very time consuming and you get a couple dozen every day. Pretty soon you look up at the clock and half an hour, 45 minutes has gone by and you got
Hmm.
to get ready for practice or you got to do this or that or whatever. You got this meeting coming up. And so, that I think the managing messages, social media, emails, has been, I think, but I know I've experienced it. That's what's changed a lot over the
Hmm.
past 3 to 4 years. Just the proactive outreach from student athletes,
Right.
personally.
Right. Then they get DMs for me to be on a podcast. And they're like, what the hell is this guy doing? I'm trying to recruit, and this guy's DMing us to come in here. And I'm like, I'm just adding to your problems, guys. Don't worry about it. Um,
No, no, this is fun. This is good stuff. But you're right. I mean, the opportunity to get to, whether it's another coach or whether it's a recruit or what, getting to talk with people is and communicate and get to know people and build relationships is super important and valuable and it's
mhm.
fun.
Well, and like I talked to Coach Miller about it. Like, then what happens is you may not recruit a kid that I have, but like if he sees a person they're recruiting is playing my team, they might reach out and say, "What do you see from this kid when you were scouting?" And this has happened to me a couple of times where I might say, "You know what? That kid is not all that they're cracked up to be. He might have just had a bad game." Or I might say, "Yeah, that kid's the real deal. You should go get him." And like, Steve, you're supposed to be helping your own kids. I'm like, I am. I took upon myself this year to be like the college person with the head coach. So when a college coach reaches out, they talk to me or they talk to the head coach. I took that upon myself. But I said, I'm not about to ruin like another kid's life if a coach I know reaches out to me and says, "What do you think about this kid that you just played against?" Like, That's not what this is about. It's not to be like, screw this kid over and be like, no, he sucks. Don't even do it. Or me be like, no, I'm not going to help. No, like he was good. Or we had a game this year against a Division 1 looking recruit. We made him look silly. And I actually said on the sideline, that kid's getting he was getting recruited by the MAC schools. And I go, that kid, like not trying to be mean, but I was like, that kid, our sophomore quarterback on inside zone would keep and just run around him because he just kept crashing in, crashing in, crashing in. And I'm like, that
Mhm.
kid, like normally when you see that dude, you want to double team him. I never double teamed him because I wasn't too worried about it. One of those things. Like, no offense to the kid, I hope he goes to the MAC, but like, a coach said something to me, and I was like, yeah, maybe it was just a bad game. So watch the film. That might have been a bad game, and so I'm about helping coaches in that aspect as well. And like you said, it's weird. I told our kids, hey, I'm helping with the college thing. Let me know what coaches have talked to you. And they go, well, we're reaching out to the coaches ourselves. And that's new for me too. Like, oh, you're reaching out to coaches? He goes, oh yeah, here's the coaches I've talked to and blah, blah. And so I'm like, go for it. But then I've helped them type up how to say the right thing. Don't just say, hey, yo, coach, what's up? And I'm like, no, you can't do that. You gotta, hi, coach, so and so. I'm Steve Kaczewski. I'm reaching out because I'm going to be a senior. I'm looking to play college football. Like, I have to have them type it up. And that part's changed because I remember when I was in high school, we had flip phones and they'd call you, and that's about it. There was no texting, there was no Twitter, there was no Facebook. And it's like, okay, this has changed a little bit. So this whole recruiting thing, I've learned a few things, but that's just kind of changed for me too.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's great for you, just to have honestly the insight of speaking with some coaches and hearing their perspectives, some college coaches, and how to help your players reach out and market
Mhm.
themselves and everything. And no, and what you were talking about previously, I've asked high school coaches, hey, who is the best player you played against this year?
Yeah,
Who's in your conference? Like, who do you think we should be looking at that we're missing out
yeah,
on? And especially with a lot of what you see right now and you get from players is their highlights, right? So you
right.
you see the best
Yeah,
plays,
yeah.
and if you're not seeking out game film or you're not, talking with their high school coaches, to kind of see what the deficiencies are, or maybe if you haven't seen them in person at camp or in
Mhm.
person in a game, which isn't always possible to do. It's so important to hear perspectives of others and just use that as part of a piece of the puzzle, right? As you're evaluating guys and recruiting them.
Well, then what happened when I took this over was one of our kids wants to play college football, and he goes, here's the schools I've talked to, and one of them was Minnesota Duluth, and he goes, yeah, this coach reached out to me, and I said, wait a minute. I said, I had their whole line coach on the podcast. Give me like 5 minutes. So I sent him a message. I'm like, hey, your one of your coaches reached out to this player because they're responsible for different areas. So they may not know exactly who they've talked to. So I sent him a message. I said, hey, this coach talking to our kid. He goes, hold on. He went and talked to the coach. Came. I goes, oh yeah, they're recruiting him. And then I gave him the insight just right then and there.
Yeah.
Another kid. Hey, I'm talking to this school. And I'm like, hold on, I know a coach there from the podcast. Hold on, give me a second because I've been doing this since COVID. I'm like, give me a second. And I'm like sending messages, and the kids find that amazing. They're like, wait, you know a coach there? And I'm like, yeah, hold on. Just send him a quick text. And then I'm like, but now you realize I'm going to tell them the truth about you because now I'm putting my name on the line and my reputation. And some kids are like, oh, and then some kids are like, that's cool. But the kids that go, oh, and I'm like, do you still want to play college ball or do you want to find, or it's realistic too? Like a kid, I could, like right now, you could ask me, I'd be like, you know what? I have one kid that could play Division 2. The rest don't waste your time. They're Division 3. Like you said, from the insight I get for what coaches look for, I try to tell kids, you're not this level, you're not this level, maybe JUCO, then go again. Like, but that also
Yeah.
helps me too. Like what you guys look for, I'm like, now I could figure that out myself.
Yeah, absolutely. High school players, if they don't have that from a coach on staff or from a family member or something
Mhm.
like that, it's not their fault, right? That they don't have an understanding of what level they should play at. They're
Right.
just they everyone wants to go Division 1, right? Until until you actually get a legitimate opportunity or a legitimate chance, then there's other levels out there too. But and a lot of times certain levels, I mean, are looking for certain measurables, things of that
Oh yeah.
nature, or else it's a no, or else it's doesn't matter how good how much you maybe dominate in your high school games. We want to see this in terms of height, weight, speed, whatever it might be. So sometimes that just automatically eliminates guys, and they don't know any better. A player doesn't know any better.
Yeah, that reminds me of two things. One, I tell the kids I walked on to play at Eastern Illinois and I walked in, I'm 6'5", 270, 275. And I wanted to play O-line. They said, you're too small. And I said, too small? They go, yeah, our O-line is like 315 pounds. And this was, at the time they're pro style running the ball. And I'm like, what? Well, shouldn't they be Division One? Like I'm thinking in my head, shouldn't they be Division One? And that just blew my mind of the different levels, especially at that time, where I was like, oh, so I walk on like, well, you're gonna have to be a tight end. You're too small. And I tell the kids, and they go, you're too small. And for some, it opens their eyes like, oh, I have to be bigger. I have to be faster. Some kids, they just are like, yeah, whatever. And I'm like, no, you don't get it. Like, I was one of the biggest kids on our high school team. Then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. There's way more people like me out there than people realize, and like, oh, that offensive line 6'7", 315 pounds. Yeah, that's not going to happen. That kind of opens that up a little bit. And their eyes get real big. They're like, oh, some get it. And I'm like, yeah, that's why you're not one double A or Division One guy. That's
Yeah,
like I have some wide receivers. Well, I'm gonna go Division One. Well, how much do you weigh? I weigh 160. I'm like, yeah, it's not gonna cut it. It's not gonna happen. And there's no shame. I love Division Two, Division Three. I said, guys, there's no shame. It's not gonna be Division One, but you got to realize that Division One team has kids that are 195 pounds and they've got six of them. How are you going to stand out from that? you know, and
yeah.
try
I
to
think
get them to
something
think that.
that I've said in the past, to recruits and to groups of recruits on visits and things of that nature is, you've got to decide as a high school recruit, once you realize that, right? Or maybe you don't, maybe a player doesn't realize yet that, I'm not capable playing at the Division 1 level or FCS level, whatever it is. Boy, it feels really good when coaches are reaching out to you or talking to you at
Mhm.
camps or inviting you to game days and visits and all that stuff. But when it comes down to it, like you've got to decide, do I really love football or
Mhm.
do I love the idea of playing football and getting recruited? Because those are two totally different things.
Yes.
And no matter whether it's Division 3, NAIA, junior college, or Power 5, like there's a day if you're on a college football team somewhere that you got to show up, you get issued the same helmet, the same gear, the same pads as everybody else, and you better be
Mhm.
ready to walk on the field and hit another grown man in the mouth,
Yeah.
because that's what the returners, the veterans on those teams, they're just licking their chops to get a hold of the new freshmen,
Oh yeah.
so players
And
got to decide, especially with now with so much social media and the
oh yeah.
graphics
Yeah.
and the videos and all this stuff, and I mean, which is great, like it's all cool and it's fun to experience, but I think what gets lost in it is the reality of like hard work and the reality of being uncomfortable and the reality of all the other stuff that goes into it,
Right.
because you love football. You might not love waking up at 5 a.m. or you might not necessarily love lifting weights, but like you're going to tolerate it and you understand the value of it.
Right.
And you understand what's being built from it. And those are just two of the super important things and the sacrifices you need to make.
Right.
And I think I never say that to deter anybody, but you want to find out, you want to know beforehand whether or not do I, or maybe it makes a kid stop and think for a little bit, like, yeah, do I really love football or do I just love all the attention I'm getting right now
Mhm.
and the recruiting process that's happening? Because at some point, you're going to have to put the pads on and step out on a practice field and earn it and prove it.
Or do they love the idea of telling their friends that they just talked to the O-line coach at Arkansas Tech? Like, do they love like telling their friends, like, hey, I've been
Yeah.
talking to the O-line coach at Arkansas Tech. I might be playing college football. Like
Yeah.
when
Getting
we
the
all
clout or the cred, the
oh yeah,
cred of name drops and all this stuff. And yeah.
yeah. and I took over the social media too. I took over a lot of things for high school, and like I have to make the freaking graphics. So my country boy self has to figure that out. So I'm feeding into it, but I also look at other schools and they promote their kids that way. So I had to figure out how to do that. So I created the Twitter page or X, whatever you want to call it, Facebook group for the whole community. So Facebook's like for the parents and community, Twitter's for everybody else, Instagram. Oh my gosh. Now then they said, Coach Steve, can you make a TikTok for us? I was like, no, that's where I draw the line. I don't know any like I can't do that at all. Then another thing I tell the kids, be a multi-sport athlete. You college coaches recruiting love multi-sport athletes because we have kids are like, well, I might just play baseball and not do this. And I'm trying to tell them like, even if you're just going to do baseball, baseball coaches want you to do other sports too, like well, I'm going to quit this sport and just focus on football. And I'm like, they're not going to love that at all. What do you mean? I'm
Mhm.
focusing on football. I'm like, trust me, they are not going to love that you're just focusing on football because now all your muscle groups and nervous system just knows football. It doesn't know basketball and the side movements and baseball, hand-eye coordination, track, learning how to run. They're not going to love that unless you are an absolute stud like I can't even think of a person, but an absolute stud. They're not going to love it, guys. They're just
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yep. And just, wanting to be a competitor, in different sports as well, and not to mention obviously the physical abilities and attributes and skills that multi-sport, different playing different sports, those things develop.
Yeah. Or they,
But I'm
oh,
sorry,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, I didn't do that thumb on purpose. Zoom does that all by itself, just so you know. Um, the other thing I tell them is, like you just brought up, the getting up at 5 a.m. My, I'm doing like the feed the cats approach, where like we're trying to be faster by doing less. Some days I'm like, guys, school starts at 7:45, come in at 6:45, so we're done by 7:15. You have time to get ready for school. I have guys not showing up and some want to play college football. And I said, guys, what happens when they ask us, do they show up to everything on time? Blah, blah, blah. And we tell them no. Oh, well, they'll get over it. I'm like, no, they won't. They're not going to get over that. And guys, it's 6:45. That's nothing compared to being at the weight room or at your meeting at 5 a.m. It's not 5:05 or 5:15. It's you are already there by 5 a.m. 6:45 is nothing. Like, and they're like, well, it's too early. What do you mean it's too early, guys? You're looking to play college football or any sport. I tell them any sport, you are going to have to be there sometimes at 5, 6 a.m. because maybe that strength coach has to work with every single sports team depending on the size of your college. Like they have to manage what time you come in, and they don't get that. And I don't understand why, because I told them they're going to ask us, do they show up to everything? Their grades, their attitude, then they look at how you can play. Like
Yeah.
they already know how you can play by talking to us. Like they already know. And so hopefully it clicks with some kids, some of our younger kids it has. I have a 6'5", 290-pound offensive lineman. He's a sophomore. As a freshman, he walked in that size and I got all excited. I'm like, this kid might be able to play college football. That type of kid where you got to fight him to get there on time, behave in school. And I'm like, and he wants to play college ball. And I'm like, if you don't turn around right now as a sophomore, you're probably not going to.
Hmm.
And I'm the asshole. They call me, they say I yap too much, is what the kids say. You're yapping too much. And I say, no, I'm a truther. There's a difference. I don't yap. I tell you the truth, and the truth hurts sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. I mean, the amount of people out there, kids who want to play college football, far exceeds the amount of spots and opportunities that are available. So, what's going to differentiate, you know, outside of the athletic ability? I mean, what's going to differentiate someone from somebody else? And, all those other attributes and the desire, to win. Something we talk about a lot throughout the whole year, here at Tech and everywhere I've been is, and I'm sure, you obviously see it and experience it too, but at the high school level, like everybody's pumped on Friday nights. Everybody wants
Yeah.
to win on Friday nights and everybody's, got the jersey on and hyped up. For us, it's Saturdays, right? But to truly be successful and develop and get better, like, all right, who has that same desire to win at 6 a.m. on a cold January morning
Mhm.
when we're working out outside? Who has that same enthusiasm when it's super hot in July, right? And you're
Mhm.
running in the heat. Who has that? Who has the desire to win when it means that you need to be more disciplined with your diet, or that you need to be getting more sleep. You need to be going to bed earlier so that your body is rested and recovered for the next day's workout. During the season, during game day, game week, right? Everybody's fired up. Everybody wants to
Mhm.
win, but I'm interested in who's willing to make the sacrifices and be disciplined to create those habits that you need to do all year round so that you can enjoy success on Fridays and Saturdays in the fall.
Yeah. That's what we're fighting right now. We made the playoffs for the first time since 2014 last year, which was awesome for the school. Now we have some kids that are comfortable. They're like,
Yeah,
we're just gonna, not all of them, I shouldn't say this. I'm not trying to be bad about the kids, but you get the vibe of like, oh, we're just gonna do it again. And then we have those kids that show up to the weight room every day, speed every day. And I told them that just doesn't happen again. You don't just win again. Well, coach, we have the same schedule. Like we have the exact same schedule, just flip flopped home and away. And I said, oh, so that's going to be the exact same teams we just played, right? Like they're not going to change. They're not going to look at us and say, oh, they got to the playoffs last year. Now they think they're going to do it again. We're going to stop them type of mentality. And you have to figure out how to get with those kids. Like when we all played, that wouldn't have happened. We'd be like, oh no, like we got to make the playoffs again. We got to do this again. How do we get there? They're just like, it's going to happen, you know? And again, it's social media. So they show up once and show a picture in the weight room. They're like, I'm working. Then there's me commenting, no, you're not. You were there one day. Like, I'm just a jerk. I'm like, oh, really? Or like,
that's the truth.
they're at X Sport. I'm like, oh, that's cool. But you weren't with us. Like you weren't with us.
Yeah,
Or they're going to show up in the summer and be like, oh, I'm good enough. Okay. You're about to find out. You're going to find
yeah.
out real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, fighting complacency. And I mean, you hear about it at every level. I think it's probably more prevalent, at the high school level and just with, maybe not your whole team being as mature yet,
Yeah.
but I mean, you hear that's one of the hardest issues to overcome at the NFL level. It's difficult at the college level for teams who have success, so finding ways to try and get rid of that contentment is a challenge for sure at any level.
Yeah. And you guys now have to recruit the people to stay now with the transfer portal stuff. Like, you almost have to get them like, okay, we got them here. How do we get them to stay now? So that just adds more
Yeah.
on you. Maybe not so much a division 2, but I think a little bit of you just have to keep them now, for you guys. Like, how do we keep them? And you're putting all that time in and they might leave still. And you're like, well, can't be mad about it.
Yeah. I think, my personal opinion on that, especially at our level, I think if there are players who, I mean, perform at a level, underclassmen, all conference, all American, like if they have a legitimate shot to, I think, move up a level and not go somewhere as a backup, like go somewhere where they have the opportunity to compete and contribute legitimately, like that's awesome. Like more power to you. Yeah, it stinks for us, but you've got an opportunity to play and make an impact at a higher level. Personally, like I would be happy for someone in that situation. But if it's just guys trying to just look for a change of scenery because maybe things aren't going how they thought it would, or because things are challenging them at a certain school, or things are making them uncomfortable. Is that really going to change somewhere else? I don't know.
Right.
But yeah, you bring up talking through a lot of different things in recruiting, and now with transfers and all that type of stuff. I know recruiting, the core of it hasn't changed.
Mhm.
In terms of you got to try and build relationships with guys who you believe can help your team. But I think what's changed is maybe getting to the bottom of who truly wants to work and be challenged and be pushed and be there and put in the
Mhm.
time, and in term as opposed to people looking for social media likes, or from a coach's perspective, some of just the other things that add more to your plate and take more
Right.
of your time away in terms of monitoring social media more, creating graphics, like all that stuff at the high school level and at our
Yep.
level too, that doesn't fall on recruiting staff. That falls on us as assistant coaches, on
Right.
top of everything else you're doing with your players and monitoring too. So it's just all, there's a lot of extra stuff that's being added to it. At the
Right.
end of the day, identifying talent, building relationships, like that hasn't changed, but there's a lot of other stuff you got to sift through, and there's other tasks you kind of got to do now to keep up with the Joneses, in
Mhm.
terms of recruiting.
Well, that's why I tell people, you guys earn your money now. Like I'm like college coaches are earning that money now. Like I have your guys' back. I'm like, I don't care what people say. You guys are all earning it now because that's just more and more and more and more that just come in every year. And you're like, oh, this is another thing. Oh, this is another thing. But you also do football all day, every day. So you can't really be mad about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Something with football,
Something.
usually depends on the year. Yeah, might be something outside of it, but it's fun. That's, one of the things I enjoy about it too is at the college level, like you're right, you're always doing something related to football,
Right.
but there's kind of the different seasons, so to speak, throughout the course of the year.
Hmm.
You're in the season in the fall where you're in your routine of game planning and game weeks and all right, flip the page to a new opponent each week and the challenges that go along with that, and then all right, it flips to very quickly, right? When the season ends, it flips now to recruiting, so you've got a couple months of that where it's hardcore with a lot of those types of things. All right, you finish recruiting and now you're into development with your off-season development and you're getting ready for spring ball. So then it's kind of a deep dive back into the schematics and
Yep.
the fundamentals and, hey, what are we, gonna change, tweak, keep the same schematically. All right, how can we do this better technique wise, fundamental wise? Then you get your spring ball, then that finishes, you're kind of in summer mode. So, one of the things that I enjoy is it's not always the same.
Okay.
There's
Yeah.
certain times of the year when certain things get more intense for sure. But there's kind of a cycle and different seasons throughout the course of a year that you can go through. All ultimately, focused on football. But yeah, sometimes when I'm getting tired of one thing or another, it's kind of a relief to be able to switch the page and all right, now we can actually talk about some X's and O's and watch some
Mhm.
film for a little bit.
That's kind of why I like coaching different sports is I can turn the page and focus on this sport,
Yeah,
turn the page, focus on this one. Even though I still do football, like I said, I'm doing sprint training in the morning, then I coach softball. But that's my football fix is come get your sprint workout in, go to the weight room, and then I'll do softball. Then I do my job, and then I'll do softball. And that's about it. And then the summer hits, you're doing it all again. It's like, hey, you got basketball camp, football camp, and it's always keeping me busy, focus on different things. And so it's always good to do something different, not just that. If we talk about
yeah,
multi-sport athletes, it's good to do different things while they do different things too.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Well, coach, I appreciate you taking all this time to talk to me during right before you start spring ball. So I'm very appreciative. I know spring ball is a busy time, but I do appreciate you taking that time to speak to me.
No, it was fun. It's always great to talk ball in some way, shape, or form, and talk about things that are going on in the world of football, and hear from your perspective. Things from the high school level too. So I really enjoyed it and appreciate you having me on.